Hey, ciao. Thank you so much. It's
Am I
great
supposed to
talking
say that too?
to you. You can say it. You can say, ciao, bella.
No.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Giulio Show. Today, I got a great guest that I think you'll find really interesting, and it's all about finance wellness and finance literacy. And I couldn't find a better expert than I found and who I met in Washington, D.C. when we were there for an ACTS convention. Actually, a meeting so that we could meet with state senators and congressmen and women to help us create and support a bill. But while I was there, I got a chance to meet Erin Kuhn. Kuhn, right? Kuhn. I got it right. Erin Kuhn. And she just impressed me with the wealth of knowledge that she had. I could have, oh my God, the wealth of knowledge that she has about money and how to handle money and how to take care of it. I could have used her in my younger years because, boy, when I started making money, because I had none, I spent it like crazy. So Erin would have been a great friend to have back then. So Erin, just so you know a little bit about her, she is president and a partner of Qnity Inc. She's a leader in financial literacy. She takes us from knowing to doing. She's an expert in family business, and she helps us with understanding. And we're going to talk to her more about the three categories of entrepreneurship. Erin's passion is helping businesses, helping professionals, and as well as students reach their financial wellness. So, welcome to the show, Erin. How are you?
Hi, Giulio. It's so great to be with you. And thanks for that intro. I don't know, expert in family business. I'm like, you know what? I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I know we share that in common, and it's a constant learning experience, like so many things in life. But I remember we sat together, and I learned a little bit about your story and bonded over our love for gnocchi. And I wish we were doing this over gnocchi and wine. That's the only thing that could be better.
Well, that could be arranged. I have a
Yeah,
beautiful
let's do
outside
it.
kitchen, and we can you can bring your fiance over.
Yeah.
We'll do a nice cookout outside in the pizza oven and
Oh my
make it
god.
in the pizza oven. It's there's nothing like cooking it in a pizza oven. You
Well, my
know.
fiance says that with pot, he is like he will only roll fresh pasta now. Like he's anti-pasta. I'm like, you can't every night. We can't just roll pasta. So he would be very down with that. I prefer on the eating side versus the cooking side, but let's make it happen. I love it. But
Oh,
anyways, thanks for having me, Julio. I'm
oh
glad
no,
to be here.
thanks for being on. There's so many things that we all need to know about. People are afraid of making money, how to
Mhm.
keep money, how to sustain money, or sometimes they're truly guilty about making money,
Oh yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. So tell us a little bit more, so we can get to know you a little bit better of what you actually do.
Yeah, and I think to give some context of what I do, kind of to start back at the beginning of how I got to where I am and doing the things that I'm doing. I mean, I wanted to be a reporter. I never wanted to be a I never even considered being a business owner or a partner in a business. It just, it's kind
See
of
that?
funny how things happen like that, right? And so I'm in business with my father. He's the CEO of our different companies. And so I think I like to tell his background too, because I think it gives some context in terms of what we do when it comes to money. So Tom Kuhn is our CEO of Qnity and our different arms of Qnity. And I remember when I was younger, we were living in Colorado and he was in finance. So he was working for what is now PricewaterhouseCooper. At the time, it was called Coopers and Lybrand. So PricewaterhouseCooper is one of the big financial firms. And so he was in finance, and then pretty quickly made a transition as he entered what is the professional beauty and wellness industry, became co-owner and partner in an 8 location salon group, kind of luxury salon spa group, 400 employees.
Wait a minute. Wait a
um,
minute. Let's back up a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
It goes from this financial world,
yeah.
which because when I started here, everybody told me what a loser I was and what a loser I will be. But
Mhm.
your dad, who was very successful in the financial world, went into the beauty industry.
Yeah.
I just had to chime in there because that's
Yeah.
just blows my mind, and people need to hear that because when their
Yeah.
kid says, "I wanna be a hairdresser," or "I wanna get in the beauty industry," don't shame them. There's a lot of great rewards in that, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's kind of, when we look at moments in careers life, and it's funny because I now and there's a whole company created that services people based on that moment for him, which was moving from finance to being responsible for 400 hairdressers, massage therapists, estheticians, makeup artists. And as you pointed out, huge culture shock for him, right? Coming from a very male dominated, left brain dominant, if you believe in that kind of thing, right?
Yes, I do.
Analytical, logical, numerical, step by step, full of spreadsheets, trying to now help lead a team of creative, emotional, intuitive, predominantly female professionals that really he looked at it from a financial perspective of, wow, what an opportunity to have someone in your chair or behind a table, and the business opportunities, right? So he was trying to drive profitability and also help people make more money. And he immediately saw how much fear there was around money, how much fear and lack of understanding. And so, he talks about when he would, and this is now in what we do every day, how he would show spreadsheets and be like, oh, if you just do this, this, and this. And it was like repeatedly talking Mandarin to someone who actively doesn't understand Mandarin and doesn't want to learn Mandarin,
I'm
right?
glad you said that because I said
Yeah,
that to my accountant. "You're speaking a foreign language. Can you speak
exactly.
English to me?"
Yeah. And that's okay, right? And one of the things that I probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned from my dad is everybody's ignorant only on different subjects, and everybody's brilliant only on different subjects, and it's okay. Um and it's a quote he always uses. It's not, I don't think it's an original quote, but it's okay to really recognize that we all have strengths and weaknesses. So fast forward, he really recognized an opportunity to teach finance and money through visual tools and systems in a very simple way for visual learners. You mentioned you have dyslexia. A lot of people do have dyslexia and learning disabilities where numbers kind of get jumbled and it's very confusing. And then ultimately you shy away from it because it makes people feel stupid because they don't understand it. And um, and they shouldn't, and so they shouldn't feel stupid about not understanding something and not having it be their language of choice. And so I remember vividly, I think I was 16. He told us that he was at that salon group for 6 years, and he came home and he told us he was leaving his position. And I was like, at that time, let me tell you, my identity was fully formed into being a salon owner's daughter, like free products, treatments whenever I wanted, bringing in all my friends. We went to horse camp and we all came in and got cornrows, like we'd come in for waxing parties. Like I loved being in the salon. I grew up folding towels. And that to me, that was when I was 16, right? I was a high school kid. I didn't know anything. And I remember I was like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do for work? And he goes, I don't know. I think I'm going to be a cashier at Byerly's. That was our local grocery store. And I was like, oh, you can, whatever. So that's kind of
I
it.
love that because it's never too late
Yeah,
to
exactly.
change, or to start something
Exactly.
new. So
Exactly.
that's
And I was
amazing.
like, oh my God, my friends will see, whatever. So, anyways, but he left that company. And I really admire what he did. He took a sabbatical. And ultimately, he knew if he was going to support artists and creative professionals, he needed to become an artist. So, for I think it was a full year, he became a professional photographer and he exhibited his photos in New York, and he had to learn what it was like to sell his art. And it was less of a passion, but more like, okay, I get the finance side. How can I actually be an artist and actually practice and learn what it's like? So, I remember too, he started a collection and he wrote a book called Shadow Man. So at that time, I watched my dad starting to take pictures of his shadow, which at that time I'm like, what is happening? Like this is,
Yeah.
it's very confusing in a transition. But ultimately, after that sabbatical, he then created Qnity. And so that's where I came in, which was I was a junior in college and I had an internship, and he had just recently started Qnity. And at that time, it was just workshops primarily for business owners in the beauty and wellness sector, teaching about money and creating more sustainable businesses. And so I
Well,
was yeah,
let's go
yeah,
back a little bit
go
because
for it.
you say literacy in the beauty, but in the beauty industry, but what he's teaching also could be used in
Oh, yeah,
multiple industries, not
totally.
just the beauty industry. So it
No,
applies to
yeah,
everybody.
it
So I
does,
just want
and
to make sure people knew that.
oh yeah, this is I mean, and I think what we do is it's really a learning system for visual learners about finance. So if you identify as a visual learner, and you know, analytics and numbers and spreadsheet or even money is just not something that you really understand, and maybe it generates fear, which by the way is the vast majority of people. I think the vast majority, I think there's some statistics where it's the majority of people would rather clean their toilet than do a basic math equation. I
Mhm.
think it's like 30% of people say they'd prefer, or maybe 60%. I'm totally butchering it, but
That's
it's
kind of
something
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely applicable, and what's really interesting is, um, there was a time well, we've worked with some of the largest financial firms. So we did a project with, Merrill Lynch, which is now Merrill, they've rebranded. So Merrill is one of the largest financial firms in the world, Bank of America, and also JP Morgan. So we've done stuff with, um, with a brokerage firm that was trying to exceed $1 billion in revenue, and we've done stuff with, wealth management, and they've used many of the Qnity tools and systems. So it's absolutely applicable. I think for us, we just have a deep passion, and our largest market is in the beauty and wellness sector, but absolutely applicable to anyone. But I
I
think
think that's great that you have a passion for that because yes, well, our next show, one of our shows that's going to be on next, I talked to a trust attorney,
oh yeah,
and
amazing.
he was also counsel for Merrill Lynch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of people don't. Once again, when you're going to school them here on how to, get some wellness and some literacy and with finances, then they're going to have to definitely create their trust.
Oh,
So
of course.
this
Of
this
course.
goes hand in hand together. So this is going
Yeah.
to be really good. So you guys pay
Well,
attention.
yeah, and it's about economic empowerment, and it's about giving people ability to have greater economic empowerment. And so it's a deep passion. And so to kind of jump back to how I got into it, he had just started Qnity. I was in college. I had an internship. Bottom line, to make a long story short, it was a summer before my senior year. The company I was interning at got acquired. They pulled us into a room and said, hey, this company's acquired within a week. Everyone needs to move to Denton, Texas. I'm from Minnesota at the time. So I was like, I start school in 2 months. I can't move to Texas. This is just an internship. So naturally, as one does, I called my dad, freaking out. I was very focused on my resume. I said, who's going to hire me for 2 months? I worked so hard to get this internship. I'm not going to move to Texas. And he said, I know, I'll hire you. And I was like, I don't even know what you're doing. You're taking pictures. I don't even know I had no idea what he was doing at that time. And so he had a studio office in Minneapolis. That's where initially we're from. And I said, okay. Or he said, well, I'll match your pay at your other
Yeah,
internship.
nice.
And I was like, all right, I don't really have a choice here. Otherwise, I'm going to have to, and he knew I'd have to ask him for money otherwise, because I was a college student.
Yeah, he's like,
And so
let her work for it.
I was like, exactly. So I'm like, okay. And so I came in to what was a 2 month internship. And that was 12 years ago. And I think I took 1 year off to work in corporate America just to kind of step back before I came on as a partner. But ultimately, what I saw was I saw him do these workshops, and I saw people who owned businesses, okay, who were business owners who were really struggling financially and really stressed about money and really did not understand money. And so I saw them in these workshops have these transformations. I still remember there was a woman in the class. She owned 3 location businesses, also a coffee shop.
Yep.
So small business, right? These are small business owners. And she was in the class. She had 80 something employees. Okay. I mean, it's still a small business by definition, but that's a lot of people on your payroll, right? That's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah,
lives you're responsible for.
yeah.
And in the middle of the class, she threw down. We were talking about measuring sales and having a formula to measure sales. And she goes, why the hell did nobody tell me it could be this simple? And she was in her 60s, and she was in massive debt. And she was like, I'm just pissed. Nobody told me this sooner. And I remember as I was sitting there as a college kid, I'm like, number one, I didn't learn about any of this in school in my expensive college education? Why is but we all have to do this. We all have to deal with finance. And why, you know, why are people learning about this? In my mind, at some point, I was like, it's almost, I don't want to say it's too late because it's never too late, but that woman could have avoided a lot of stress and a lot of turmoil had she had the opportunity to get that type of education and training sooner, right?
Well, yeah, because just so you know, like in my generation, in your younger
Hmm.
generation,
Yeah.
everything was a secret. Nobody
Mm,
taught you anything. It
yeah.
was, they just hid their money. They just saved their money. And I do look at my parents who worked for peanuts, but were able to pay their house, their car.
Yeah.
And I mean, they were immigrants making very little money, but
Hmm.
they didn't share with us. They didn't sit down and show us how to manage the money because
Yeah.
everything was a secret. They didn't want you to know what they had and how they had it.
Hmm.
And the same thing with school. Nobody ever sat down and said, "This is what you're going to come up against."
Hmm.
Which I think they need to reincorporate, not just talk about it, but really teach because nobody uses check anymore. But when I was growing up, none of my
Yeah.
friends knew how to write a check, balance a check,
Hmm.
the checkbooks, or reconcile it. I mean, we didn't
Hmm.
know any of that. We just knew that if we had cash, we could spend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how a lot of, especially when someone who is a practitioner, right? So let's use the example of a classic example of, a cook in a restaurant, right? Somebody loves cooking, then they're a chef, then they ultimately want to be the owner of a restaurant, right? What's not realized is now you are totally shifting. You are not going to do your craft. You are going to hire some other individuals to do the craft, and you now run a business, which means you run a profit and loss statement and you manage a team, and it's very different. It's a very different skill set. And I also think that understanding to empower someone to do that is not always talked about, and and it's okay to learn things the hard way sometimes, right? That's unfortunately how a
We all
lot of
got
us
to
learn,
learn things
right?
on.
We all gotta, but to the point that we can make it easier for people, and we can give them the playbook, because the, and I mean, we're talking on a podcast now. There's no shortage of access to information. Anyone can go get that type of training, but it's
Yeah.
how do they actually apply it in a way that works for the way they learn and the way they like to learn. So
You
um
said something interesting
mhm,
back there because I get this a lot, especially in the industry I'm in.
yeah,
Um, Everybody's goal, not everybody, but the majority of people is someday I'm going to own my own place. And it's a different game
yeah,
from working, which God bless the people who want to go to work from 9 to 5, go home and not think about it. But when you leave that realm of just doing your work to owning the business, they don't realize what really goes behind it because they just look at, I can be the owner and make some more money, but they don't realize the responsibilities that go behind that and the
right.
financial
And
responsibilities.
there's the assumption that you're going to make more money, right?
That's
Which
true.
in
Yeah.
many cases, that's not always true. And it usually takes a while until that happens, right? And I think it's like the allure of, I think it's really healthy to have this allure of being an entrepreneur and being a business owner and the pride that comes with that. And I don't think it's the right path for everyone. And I think it's okay to want to be what we call, which we're going to talk about, I know, an intrapreneur. Having a business and being empowered to build a business, but not being responsible for the entire business. I think in my 20s, I mean, I remember, I think there was a time where in my early 20s, we had a success experience, right? Nothing revolutionary, but I remember being 22 years old, being in a boardroom with a bunch of 60-year-old men doing a very large transaction. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 22 years old. Like, I honestly felt cool. And then shit hit the fan for a little bit. And I'm like,
Did they all die?
no, no, but it was, I mean, there was a lot of pressure and stress. And I think there was times where I didn't know how we were going to pay the bills,
Right.
like every entrepreneur does. And I think my mental health, I was too young, and I was not equipped for that level of risk. Thank God I had a business partner, because if I didn't have, there's no way I would have had the skill set, or frankly, at that time, I don't think I would have had the resilience to be able to kind of get through some of the challenges that come through being an entrepreneur, right?
Right.
So,
Right. And
yeah,
even though you have these lessons on finance, wellness, and literacy,
mhm,
you're still going to make discoveries.
totally.
you're
Totally.
still gonna I mean, it still grows you and shapes you and makes you smarter if you allow yourself to learn from it,
Mhm.
rather
Yeah.
than just give up on it. But you said intrapreneurship. Am
Yeah.
I right? Intro or inter?
Intra, like a
Intra.
intra,
Okay.
intra.
So give me
Yeah.
those 3 categories and let's break them down and tell me exactly what they mean because most people just hear one word,
Yeah.
entrepreneur. That's
Totally.
it. And but
Totally.
you broke it down into 3 categories.
Mhm.
What are those 3 categories? One of them being entrepreneur.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is something, and what I'm sharing is really a framework in which to think about what it means to work in a society, right? And I would argue, there's different variations of these, but the kind of three big ones, of course, number one is an entrepreneur, which we've obviously talked about. Everybody knows what an entrepreneur is. I
Broke.
think broke and stressed all the time. It's hilarious.
Because we take too many chances.
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly, exactly. An entrepreneur is a business owner that has a business with the purpose to build a team. Okay. So this is someone who has a purpose of having employees or having team members with the essence to build something that goes beyond them and not to be the practitioner. Okay. So perfect example is, all right, let's go back to the restaurant example, right? A chef or some a chef now becomes a restaurant owner. He hires a new chef, he hires a bunch of cooks, he runs the business. Okay. An entrepreneur that builds the business. Maybe he sets the menu, trains other people to do it. But ultimately, the entrepreneur will move away from ultimately doing their specific craft and training other individuals to do the craft. And the key thing with an entrepreneur is they take on all the financial risk.
mhm,
Okay. They take on all the financial risk comparative to otherpreneurs. So let's go to the next one.
that's where the
That
great comes in.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. And
exactly.
a
One
great
day I'm gonna have
somebody
it.
yeah, believe me, and I don't know I never chose to be an entrepreneur, it just happened. Uh,
Yeah.
but, somebody gave me a great book to read once. It was E-Myth Revisited.
Oh,
And
yeah. I
which
got it.
is a great book for anybody who's starting a
Mhm.
business, and it always talked about if you're the pie maker, you don't wanna be making the pie and working
No.
for the business. The business should be working for you, so you
Mhm.
wanna train a slew of people who
Mhm.
can make the same pies as you did,
Mhm.
and that made so much sense. It's like, yeah, train people to do the job well, and that's your job as an entrepreneur, because a lot of people think an entrepreneur is the person who owns a business and is doing the work.
Yeah.
Meaning still, like especially hairdressers, right? They want to own the
Mhm.
salon, but they want to still work behind the chair, be the salon manager, be the artistic director, and that could work in a restaurant too. The chef might still want to be the maitre d', the
Yeah.
receptionist, and the cook, and
Mhm.
you can't be everywhere at once. So an entrepreneur
Mhm.
is the one who owns the business, trains people, takes the financial risk, is what you're saying.
Mhm. It's the
And I know that's
financial
good.
risk. That's the key element, and ultimately, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because everybody wants to have a business and wants to be able to build a business, but you have to be able to get the business producing a level where you can pay other people. And that's the hardest part, right? That's the hardest part is breaking through that
It's
that
one of the biggest expenses, right? Is payroll.
biggest expenses. Exactly. So that is how we define an entrepreneur, right? And that's not our, obviously everybody knows intuitively
Right.
what an entrepreneur is. Now, I think where they get really blended together, especially in the industry you and I are in, which is the professional beauty industry, which is a solopreneur. Okay. A lot of times people think being their own boss and being a solopreneur, they identify as an entrepreneur. I think that's fine. I think there's a cornerstone difference between an entrepreneur and a solopreneur, though, that's not discussed. A solopreneur is a business of one, and they are producing their craft. Okay. So that is, let's go back to the restaurant example. They are cooking for families. I don't know, right? It's just, I'm going to be a chef out of my home. I'm going to cook for families or in a salon
Or
environment.
maybe a food truck.
Or food truck, yeah, with no
Okay,
staff, right? And they're
right.
producing. So, or for a salon, the typical example is a hairdresser that says, "Okay, I was working for a salon. I'm now going to go work independently. I'm going to go rent a suite where I am now everything, right? And I can only grow my business to the extent that I can produce." And they're still actually doing a craft and getting paid for that craft. And the key cornerstone is it's a business of one.
Right, and a
Now, the next
solopreneur can only make so much money.
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
they're one person, so they can only do so much in a day. But should that go on my business card? I'm a solopreneur?
No, yeah, no, no. I mean,
Just
it's
so people don't get mixed up and say, "I gotta
right.
put that on my card."
No, no, and I mean, I think the issue is they
Just
consider.
understanding it.
Yeah, it's just it's a framework in which you can think of things because there are certainly people that want to be a solopreneur, right? Maybe that's what brings them joy and that's their ultimate vision of success. They want to go produce when they can. They don't mind managing all the expenses, the marketing, the product, working with the accounting firm. I mean, you still have to run your own little mini business, but you're just not building a team.
Yeah,
And
and
so
there's some people who are brilliant at that because maybe they can't work with a bunch of people. Some people, it
totally.
distracts them and it throws them off, all the confusion and noise around them. So it's almost like they're introverted, but
Yeah.
they're not because they're working with people, but they like to be one-on-one, not with a dozen.
And absolutely. And here's the thing, solopreneurs can turn into entrepreneurs. So let's
Easily.
look at my personal example. Tom, before I came in and interned with him, he started it off as a solopreneur. He didn't have money to be able to hire anybody else, and he didn't really know what he was creating. I mean, a lot of times things are created out of a need and desire. So he created Qnity, did that on his own, and just thought he was going to do his thing and make a great quality of life. Ultimately, then he needed help. He hired someone, not a full time employee, a contractor. Then I came in and then it built from there. And we're still a very small company. So he ultimately could have said, okay, I want to be a business of one with Qnity. I just want this to be me going out and doing workshops and consulting with businesses, right? But ultimately, it transitioned and has built into, and now he's an entrepreneur, right? So that's solopreneur. Then what is the vast bulk of our economy is an intrapreneur, right? Which is someone who has a business within the structure of an existing business. Now, there's a couple
Say that
different,
again. Say that again.
yeah, a business within the structure of an existing business. So let's look at an example.
Good.
A waiter could be considered an entrepreneur, right? They are running their tables in the structure of an existing restaurant and they're compensated based on how they perform, right? They get a certain
Ah, okay.
hourly wage, but then ultimately what they produce and tips is what they produce, right? But
Mhm.
they're not funding the whole restaurant. They're not paying for the food. They're not paying payroll. They're not paying for electricity. They're not paying for inventory costs. They're not running the business. They're showing up to work. They're doing their thing. They're paid on performance, and then they go home.
So it's up
Same,
to them within that structure to
exactly.
create the finances that they're looking to create.
Yeah. And I think another example of an entrepreneur, we really, when we look at entrepreneur, there's two different ways that this is looked at. In traditional academia, entrepreneurship really refers to innovation within a larger corporate setting. That's not really how we define it. It's someone who, maybe thinks like an entrepreneur and encourages innovation within a larger company. That's not how we define it because we bring it more to the small business world, which is someone who works in an existing business that has tremendous financial upside because they're compensated or part of their compensation relies on their performance. Okay. So it could be bonuses, it could be commission, it could be tips. So, what a traditional example would be, again, a hairdresser, right? A hairdresser that is working in an existing salon, they are building their own clients that become loyal to them, but the salon environment is provided for them. They don't pay the bills, they don't purchase products, they don't manage marketing. The clients are attracted to the salon, but it's on them to deliver excellent service, retain their guests. They have the ability to upsell their guests because usually they're compensated based on a commission environment. So it's the really key element is that they have the benefits, many of the benefits without the financial risk associated, and part of their compensation is on
So
performance.
they would just walk in and they got an agreement saying, if I do X amount, you give me X percentage of that, plus whatever I sell on top of that. So I'm really just using your facility. I'm not paying you. You're not paying me. I'm paid based on what I do, a percentage of what I
Well, no, usually an entrepreneur is also someone on salary, right? So,
so like
or
a
on an
waiter,
hourly
a
wage. Yeah.
waitress. Okay.
Yeah. A waitress or a hairdresser, right? They go work for an existing salon, they show up, but they have the ability to increase their compensation based on how they perform.
Okay, so they get a base salary,
Mhm.
because I'm playing totally stupid with you.
Yeah.
They get a base salary, and then, up. to that base salary in order to make more, they have to perform X, Y, and Z.
Yes, exactly. So the compensation structure could change, right? It could be a combination of a base salary, it could be an hourly wage, it could be their commission structure might differ, but the to put it very very simply, their compensation can be impacted and increase based on how they perform.
Now, there's one more category you left out of there:
What's that?
entrepreneur.
What's that?
That's a person who speaks that they know everything but has nothing. We call them an entrepreneur.
Did you invent that term? You better trademark that.
Yeah, how many people have you met that could tell you what to do, everything to do, and what's gonna make you successful,
Yeah.
but they have nothing? So we say, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur."
I have not heard that one.
Well, you
But
can put that on your books now.
there you go. There you go. And really, I mean, it's really just designed as a framework. And, when we're working with students, we work with, we have over 130 schools that we work with in our financial literacy
Wow.
curriculum. And it's to give, I know we got to talk about your school, Giulio. We'll do that over gnocchi in Italian.
Yeah,
In
yeah, there you
Italian.
go, there you go.
I'm gonna wine and dine you with your favorite. Do you like Chianti? What's your favorite wine?
Oh, geez, just put it in front of me as long as it tastes good. No, but red, no white, no white, red.
No, I'm not white at all either. So I mean, what we tell them is as they're making career decision is to understand which of those paths suit you and which of those and it can certainly change over time, but to not just want to be a solopreneur or an entrepreneur because your ego tells you that the definition of success is being your own boss, right?
Mm.
That's not the definition of success. It's not. There's plenty of people, most of my friends in different positions, the highest compensated professionals are entrepreneurs, ones that work within existing companies. It's not the ones that own businesses, it's the ones that work within structures of companies.
Yeah,
Maybe down the line, I would like to think that maybe in 20 years, I might have some more benefits down the line, but that's not guaranteed at all for me, you know?
and I'll tell you what, a lot of entrepreneurs learned really quickly in 2020
Oh my God.
the responsibilities and how quick they can lose everything
Oh, yeah.
and how
Yeah.
broke we can go quickly and mortgage our
Yeah.
homes because we have
Yeah.
to make sure we feed our people,
I know.
and pay our rents.
Yeah.
So there is, like you said, a lot of responsibility. Entrepreneurs are definitely the risk takers, but
Hmm.
you're correct. An entrepreneur
Hmm.
is sometimes makes 10 times because I look at some people that have worked for me. I'm like, how is it that you're driving that beautiful car? You live in that beautiful house. I own the business, but you're making twice the amount of money. And it's
Yeah.
not that I ever compared. It's just like blows my mind. And I was never jealous. I was happy for them. But the
Of
fact
course.
was they created, you know, that that income for themselves.
Mhm,
And I was willing to teach and create the structure, the
mhm.
building, and take on all
The risk.
the risk.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
which to me is fulfilling, so everybody has a different
exactly,
fulfillment.
exactly, and that's totally okay, and just understand which of those pathways are more suitable to your lifestyle, and which of those pathways, do you see yourself at and truly want for because and you might not know, right? A lot of times you might not know until you try,
Right.
which,
You should always
that's
try.
okay too.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, making decisions for the right reasons versus for ego or fear, right? It could go either way.
I think you hit that right on the head with ego.
Oh
People
yeah,
have to feed their ego by saying, "I am the CEO," or "I am the owner of," until they get sued. It's like, "It's not me, he owns it." Uh,
yeah,
but,
exactly.
it is. For a lot of people, it's not to serve others and
Hmm.
help others, it's to serve and help their own egos.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong. You don't have to be an entrepreneur, and you're going to stress that a little bit more to be successful or money savvy.
Oh my
So
God, no.
no. So now that you talked about entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
solopreneurship, and intrapreneurship, and whatever category we're in, we're starting to
Hmm.
make some money now, Aaron.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're making some money.
Hmm.
That's hard. I haven't heard that in a while. But anyway, we're making some money. How do we take care of it?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think ultimately, there, and that's such a broad topic, right? I mean, we have kind of eight pillars in which we look at money. And number 1 is really assessing your mindset around money, right? You can't change something or do something right when you don't understand the motivations behind it. A lot of people that we work with have a fear around money, like we said, or anxiety. We actually asked this question. We have a survey of almost 5,000 students that have answered this question, and 69% of them state they have some form of money or math anxiety, meaning they feel a sense of fear, angst, or dread even talking about money. So, recognizing that, okay, if I'm anxious about something, Julie, I'll ask you this. I mean, this might not be true for you personally, knowing your personality,
I'll
but
play. I'll play.
yeah, but the general public, when you fear something, what is the typical response?
Hide.
Hide or
Don't do
avoid.
it.
Okay?
Avoid. Hide. Don't
Exactly.
do it.
So ultimately, if you're going through life fearing something and avoiding something, that's going to create major challenges. So we need to address that before we can even talk about taxes and paying off debt, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is understanding how to grow your money in, right? Your example is somebody is making money, right? And somebody's definition of what is good money is very different person to person. And that's also fine because ultimately it you to a certain extent you need to make a certain amount of money so your needs are taken care of, right? But beyond that, if you're comfortable with a certain lifestyle, the money you make, it doesn't need to always increase if you don't necessarily want it to. You might be content with a certain income, and really maybe you have a partner that makes more. So addressing what is the number for you. Most people, I would say, want to continue to grow their earnings. I would hope they would, especially as they become more skilled. But understanding how to grow your earnings
Well,
is number
what I see people who make more money spend
2.
more money because
Oh
as
yeah,
they get it, and then they start thinking, well, this is going to be consistent and I'm going to grow it anyway. So I'll use my charge cards and start buying stuff,
yeah,
hoping that I'm going to make the same money, if not more. And they get worse into debt
one
when they
thousand
actually
percent.
could have, you know, kept debt free, still had some fun, and still grew
Mhm.
their money.
Totally. And that's the ultimate, lifestyle creep question or keeping up with the Jones. It's the more money you make, the more things that I'm going to tell a personal example because this is ridiculous. So I'm getting married and for a
Congratulations.
long time, I had a very big issue spending money because I was like, I had my own financial journey and I was very stressed about spending money. And so I have a lot of stories. Like I wore the same $20 dress on main stage presentations for 8 years. Like border, like cheap versus frugal. I was probably a little bit cheap. Okay.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, now I've had to make through this whole registry process, right? So things I never, and I was annoyed. I didn't even want a registry and my mom insisted it. So what's funny enough is now that I've gone through this registry process, I have all these new needs that I've identified in my house that if I don't get them, I'm like, I need to buy these now. And I need to do all these things now that I have the means to be able to do that, but I don't need it, right? So it's lifestyle creep is number 1, which goes to the next element, which is it is not about how much money you make. Again, basic needs taken care of and quality of life so you're not stressed. But once you get to a certain point, then it's about what you keep and what you do with it, right? Making sure I mean, it's so basic and everybody says it, but it's living within your means, right? Period. It's just understanding what you can afford and not afford. If you want something more, then you need to work for it, but making sure that you have um you manage the lifestyle creep. So money out, which is managing expenses, understanding a profit and loss statement if you're a business owner. Of course, you can also apply a profit and loss statement to your own household, right? What do you do with profit? Do you go spend that on a trip to Cabo? Do you go put it in investments, right? So that's
Hopefully
number. So
both.
we've got, yeah, both is ideal,
Hopefully
right?
both. Hopefully both.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got money mindset, money in, money out. Then the next is money borrowed. So really understanding what money have you historically borrowed? So what debt do you need to minimize or eliminate? Obviously, some debt is necessary for many people, whether it's student loans to fund an education, whether it's a mortgage. Obviously, hopefully, there's no consumer debt. So then we got money borrowed and giving a plan to get out of that debt, right? And there's lots of different ways we could go into that, but high level. Next, of course, is money saved. And money saved means making your money work for you and investing both in retirement and also traditional investment vehicles. We have, you could do a whole talk on investing, but we're talking basic level of investing for the long term to make sure that once you do want to step away from what you're doing, you're prepared to be taken care of, right? You don't have to
And
work your whole life.
what is basic? Because I mean, I've learned this later on in my life. I wish somebody would have talked to me about
Oh yeah.
401ks and
Uh-huh.
saving for my retirement when I was younger.
Hmm.
I didn't get educated on that till I was older, so I had to put more money away and
Yeah.
sacrifice more money away. So because especially now that we're living longer, who's going to
Oh, I
pay
know.
us when we retire for the next 30, 40 years? And that's when I go to the grocery stores and see these, some people do it just to do something, but I see these elderly folks who retired and had to go back to work
I
and bag up
know.
groceries, and then they ask if they can carry it out to my car. I'm like, "No, let me carry it to yours."
Oh my God,
It's
you
because
that's so heartbreaking. Oh my
yeah,
God,
because
yeah.
they didn't well, either they
Yeah.
got scammed or they didn't
Yeah.
plan properly because nobody ever sat down with them and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, you don't wanna wait for the bus, you wanna wait for the limo." You
Yeah.
know, um,
Yeah.
and some people can't even afford the bus. So why is when you say a basic investment, what do you mean by that? If your company offers a 401k or if you're the sole intro or intrapreneur, uh,
Mhm.
where do you go to do that? A CD or can you start a Roth program? Or I mean, what is the
Yeah, I mean, I think you can separate them, for retirement vehicles, right, that have tax benefits, of course. So, a 401k, an IRA, if that's not, presented by your employer. So, number one is planning for retirement, which as soon as you can start, we recommend doing that. We give percentages, all that stuff in the curriculum but ultimately at the end of the day, it's what you can afford to do just to start the process. And key is automating it. And again, there's so many, if anything I'm talking about that you don't understand or you don't know what it means, I would encourage you, go online and buy any personal finance book, or there's so many free resources out there. If you can't even buy a book, go on YouTube and search like basic financial literacy and start to just kind of get your feet wet in these terms, because it takes time. So going back to that, retirement vehicles is number one, and then just traditional investment. And when I say basic, I'm not talking about risky investments. And again, number one, I want to be clear. I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a
oh,
investment advisor. I
but you don't
automate.
want to gamble your money. I mean, that's common
No.
sense. Some people
Yeah, but a
think
lot of
stocks
people,
is
yeah. So here's what I would view as not as trying to be an investor is individual stock picking, which means I hear Dogecoin went up a ton of money. I'm gonna go buy a ton of Dogecoin, right? That is picking, which that's crypto. That's not even traditional investing, but taking risky level investments because you hear it's a trend. What I do and what we recommend is index funds, which there's tons of things that you can look at to Google index funds and what that means. But it's just basically taking an average of a bunch of companies within a portfolio and kind of recognizing that some stocks are going to completely fail. Some companies are going to completely fail because, as we know as entrepreneurs, most businesses fail. Okay.
yes.
At some point, most businesses fail. Some are going to skyrocket. You're going to take the average. I'm not an investor, and I don't think anyone can predict what's going to happen within a company. And
Not these
so,
days.
yeah, not these days, exactly. So, making sure, and if you need help learning about that, research it. There's tons of free books, again, and talking to someone that can help you out with it. But you do got to learn. Our
A
program,
lot of banks, offer that
totally.
education. If you go into your local bank, like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or any of those banks, they
Hmm.
have an investment specialist.
Yeah.
And what they do is, like you say, they diversify. So if
Hmm.
you're putting in 100 a month or you're putting in 500 a month, it goes into this pot. So while one is growing and one is sinking, it all balances out so that
Yeah.
but it compounds over years. People think, well, it's been in there a year or two and I didn't make any money. No, 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 no.
Hmm.
You start really young, and by the time you get older, you're going to be shocked at what's in there.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible what compound interest can do for you when it's in a savings vehicle or when it's in an investment vehicle, right? Debt is the opposite, right? If anyone has credit card debt, you see what happens with compound interest in a negative manner. And
Yes.
it's really, really bad and it's really dangerous. And that's why people get in a cycle. But if you do that on the opposite end and invest your money, again, with the making sure you're doing it in the appropriate manner and not being super risky. Um, Ideally, in the long term and traditionally speaking, it's going to work for you. So that's kind of the next element, which again, we
What's
could
the
talk.
rule of thumb there? Just, I mean, the basic rule of thumb. If I'm making X amount of money, what percentage of that money? Because most people will sit there and say, "Hey, Erin, I don't have money. I live week for week." And people do this to me. I'm broke, but they're sitting with a pack of cigarettes that cost them
Yeah,
$10 in their pocket. They're holding a Starbucks. They got the greatest $600 sneakers on. They're driving a nice car, but they're broke.
yeah, I
It's
know.
like, how l- let let's stop hearing the words "I'm broke." My parents, like I said, they made a buck 50 an hour. How the hell did they do it? With 4 kids when we were
I know.
immigrants. So how did they pay everything off? But they understood that they had to take a little. What is that?
And so
10%, 20%?
here's my answer. I would say whatever you will do to actually do it. So
Beautiful.
if I say 25%, somebody's going to say, "Oh my god, I can't. I don't even have that." So fine, literally do 1%. It's
Do
about
something.
Yeah, it's about building a muscle. We also teach that for business owners, which is transferring a certain portion of sales into a separate account to build up cash reserves. Last statistic I heard from JP Morgan was the average small business, how many has I was going to ask you, I'm just going to tell you, has
Okay.
14 days liquidity, okay? The average small business in the United States. So when COVID happened, they only had 2 weeks of cash reserve.
Mhm.
That's why all this, it's survival of the fittest in business. And in life, it ultimately, money is the currency that we rely on. So I would say if that's 1% of your income, if it's $5 that you're willing to transfer, so you start to see and build confidence, because a lot of times it's the fear and confidence that needs to happen for the breakthrough versus building the habit,
But
you
you're
know?
talking about not putting $5 in a savings account because that's
No,
not gonna grow your money. Uh,
no.
it's into an investment that is
Mhm.
a portfolio that has, like,
Yeah.
electrical and, gas or whatever. It's diversified. But I'll
Hmm.
be honest with you, even I cried at when somebody told me 10%. I'm like, "I can't afford 10%
Yeah.
a while back, because I was living on the edge, as you know, even as an entrepreneur, you're always,
Hmm.
uh but I'll tell you what, once you do it, you don't miss it.
No. Oh
It's
my
like
God, no.
it automatically gets taken out of your check,
Hmm.
and you're like, you don't miss it. But
It's
at first you do.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, and you think you can't live without it, but once you automate it, the key is automating it.
yes.
And I have someone in my life that I'm really trying to encourage to do this. And once they've done it, it's kind of exciting, right? It's like, oh my God, I have an investment account, it's growing and things like that. And this individual, I'm not going to say because if they listen to this, they'd know, but they check this investment account like 3 times a day. And it's like, no, you are supposed to put it there and check it like couple times a year maybe. This is a long-term activity. This is Your efforts are now best spent in this individual's case figuring out how to increase their earnings because they're at a point where in their career they're in their 20s, they need to make more money. They're in the career building stage, right? So I think just really setting it and forgetting it, and once you get to a point where you can increase it. And I think that's the challenge with so many things is everybody's looking for like what is the one size fits all approach, and the
Mm.
reality is there isn't. It's whatever approach is going to cause you to take action.
Have you
So
I knew people that started, like you said, investing,
mhm,
in, like, their 401k.
mhm,
Because they didn't manage their money right, and some of them had to cash it in, but you get
mhm.
nailed when you cash
Yeah.
it in.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Also too, they were such on a great momentum, but they
Mhm,
then lived beyond their means,
mhm. Yeah.
way beyond their means,
Yeah.
Amazon happy means,
Yeah.
and
Mhm,
they lost everything they had gained in so many years to taxes, for
mhm.
withdrawing and penalties for withdrawing early and having to pay the debt that they had to pay.
Yeah.
Then as they're older, they had to start all over again, and they didn't have the will to do that, but it's never too late to start over again.
It's never too late. And so we were on 5, which is money saved. So we've gone money mindset, money in, money out, money borrowed, money saved. The next would be money taxed. So taxes, whatever type of preneur you are, you have them and they're very expensive. Okay. And
I
if you're a
could
solopreneur, that doesn't mean you don't get to pay them. right? And
Right.
so, we're talking, so taxes, we talk about the difference between tax avoidance, which is legal if you work with a professional to help you be strategic, right? That's
Sure.
legal.
Right.
Tax evasion is illegal. Okay.
True.
So they're very different things. And so one of the biggest things with taxes is the sheer amount of confusion we hear with taxes. I mean, I, as an employer, you probably have seen this, but I cannot tell you how many times, how many stories we've heard about taxes. For example, someone going to their employer thinking the employer was stealing money out of their paycheck because they didn't understand this
I'm
is
sorry.
taxes. You've really, because you can relate because it's happened to
Yeah,
you.
well, actually, I could relate to my son when he first started working from a company, and
Yeah.
I gave him a check, and he came up, he says, "Dad, you don't need to deduct this FICA thing." He goes, "I don't need it." I practically fell on the floor dying. I'm like, "That's not me, son. That's the
Yeah.
federal government."
That's hilarious, and that's so true, and oh my god, we just had a big client. They've got, a $14 million business. They've got a bunch of team members, some really high producers. They happen to be a salon and spa, and, um, someone came to their table or came to the manager and said, "You know what? I need to cut back my hours." And she was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Well, I'm making too much money." And she's like, "Well, I thought that's a good thing." And she said, "Well, I'm getting hit by a bunch of taxes." It's like, yes, when your earnings increase, your taxes increase. That's the way the system works.
You're
Employers
still
can't
making more
control that.
money.
Yeah, exactly. You're still making more money. So, anyways, there's a lot of confusion around taxes, and I don't know how many pages the IRS document is. It's massive, right? And tax law
Mm.
changes all the time. So that's why you work with a tax professional, and that's why you have. I don't deal with taxes. I have an accountant that we pay who specializes in making sure that we understand
Hey,
taxes.
listen, I got my MBA, but I'm like, I don't need to be the MBA who does the numbers.
No,
I got an
no,
accountant who does that. I
yeah,
just need to know the questions to ask. But a
yeah.
lot of people avoid, uh, how do you say, their income, reporting their income because they don't want to be taxed a lot. But then when
Yeah,
they go to borrow for a house or a car, they have no income to report. So
yeah.
they don't get their loans. They can't buy that house. And then they wonder why they can't
Oh,
get.
it's a disaster, and it impacts entire industries, which, you were in DC with me and you see for the industry we're in, we're having to recover because earnings are really low for a profession that, you and I both know that there's tremendous income possibilities, and we've seen it. So we've done a study on it, um, and really understanding that, yeah, I mean, tax avoidance, tax evasion, the whole topic of taxes is a huge, huge issue, and I think it's just due to confusion, you know? So,
Yeah,
the
and you
next
have some
one.
pretty great graphs and you're good at that. I mean,
Oh,
you
thank you.
really
Well, I have
brought
a
a lot
team.
of great information, so that we could present to our senators and our congressmen
Mhm.
and women. So that
Yeah.
really made a lot of sense to them. And
Mhm.
even banks, I remember when I used to cut the hair of the vice president of a bank,
Mm.
and she said, because at one point when I was God, I was in my 20s. She said, I said, I want to try to get a bigger salon. I want to, she goes, I would lend you money. I know you make money. I see your place is packed.
Mhm.
She goes,
Mhm.
but you're not showing any of it.
Yeah.
She goes, if you're not showing, you can't show that you can pay the loan.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What do you know? Who told you something? You know?
Yeah.
She's like, I get what you're doing. She goes, listen, we all in the banking industry know, servers and, and people in the beauty industry and other
Mhm.
companies. We know they're making a lot of cash, but
Mhm.
today people don't really use cash anymore. They use cards. But
Exactly. So,
anyway, we
yeah.
know that you're making it. It's just that you're not showing it, so we can't help you.
Yeah.
So people need to understand that the more you hide it, the more you're hurting yourself as well.
Exactly.
Zero,
Exactly.
the IRS says zero is not a number. Just put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're going to miss opportunities. So you're going to miss opportunities when you do that, and it really, really impacts an entire industry. So we could go on that whole thing for a while.
I know,
So
I know. I talk too much. Go ahead.
no, 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 it's fine. I mean, and ultimately, if you don't understand taxes, first of all, you're not alone. You're definitely not stupid. It's very confusing. So find someone to help you or learn about it. And either way, you have to learn about it to understand the basics of it, right?
Hey, guys, just so you know, I was very, and still am somewhat, tax stupid. But I
Oh,
ask a lot of questions now, but I was very tax stupid. There's nothing wrong with that. Just ask a lot of questions.
see, totally. I mean, so was I, right? I mean, the story about your son, I mean, that happens all the time. That happens all the time. Um, so then the next one is money plan. And I think again, talking about a one size fits all, whether you're making money, what is the next thing to do with it? Or what do you want for your lifestyle? A money plan is different for everybody, right? And really, it's planning for the things that you want to experience in life. One of my core values and my whys that I really value spending money on is travel and experiences. I travel all the time and I want to be able to take my kids on 2 international trips a year. Okay. So I know that costs a lot of money. If you've traveled internationally it costs a lot of money. So you work for that and you take sacrifices and you make sacrifices because I want to build a lifestyle as such that allows me for that. My cousin, my best friend, like my sister, the girl hates travel. She literally hates it. She studied abroad in Italy and wanted to come home. Yeah, we should bring her on here to talk about that's another issue, right? But she truly does not enjoy travel. She thinks she doesn't enjoy traveling money on that. She values financial security and she values being able to live in the most beautiful home, decorate her home all the time, and spending money on household items. Okay, great.
Wrong with
Figure
that.
out what's your value.
Mhm.
Figure out what's your value and understand that it's okay to have certain values, right? For some people, it's building businesses and living really frugally and then starting another business and being able to provide new opportunities. So
Hey, you
figuring out what,
talking about me?
yeah, there you go. There you go. And really recognizing like whatever is your vision of what a successful life looks like, just use your money to build a plan so it allows you to do that, right?
Right.
And then lastly is really money success, and that just ties it all together with really who to ask for help, how to build a team. um, Ultimately I'm on this huge thing, at least in our company right now, which I'm sure you can probably relate to: who, not how, right? Who, not how. Who do you need to ask? Who do you need to be in your corner? Who do you need to help you, regardless of what the state of your finances are? Who do you need? What information do you need access to? Again, there's a gazillion free resources online. There's no excuse for not getting education and for changing your understanding on something, because anyone can get it for free. There's no So the only excuse, which we all struggle with and is a whole other element, is how do we actually take action? And it's the knowing to doing element that literally every human being in this planet always struggles with, and
That's
it's
what I
something we
love.
all have to figure out.
Knowing to doing, because a
Yeah.
lot of people know what they should do, but they don't do. So the action doesn't happen
Mm-mm.
and nothing gets done. But you know
Exactly.
you should have done it. We all do that. I knew I should
Totally.
have done it, but I should have acted on it. They start shitting all over themselves.
Yeah.
I should have this, I should have that, I should have that.
Exactly.
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. And if you can't do it, figure out, going back to mindset, what is preventing you from doing it, because there's something.
Fear. And
Because
like
if
you said, most of the time it's fear
most of
of
the time
doing
it's fear.
something. Yeah.
Fear, confusion, a big time it's confusion. I don't know what action to take, so I'm just going to take none, right?
Yeah. Fear of failure.
Fear of failure, fear of success. Lots of
Yeah.
people have that
Yeah.
too.
A
Yeah,
lot of
that's
people have
very
that.
scary. Um, and it's okay. And we're all humans and we're all trying to figure it out. And don't be so hard on yourself.
No, I love it. I love it. You gave us some really great points, some great information, things to think about. And I know
Mhm.
we could probably spend much more time, a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more time
Each
on
of
this.
those each of those topics we could have talked for hours about, right?
Hours,
Yeah.
but at least, as long as you're planting the seeds in people's
Mhm.
minds,
Mhm.
it gives them something to think about. Because you even said it, there's a wealth of knowledge out there, such as YouTube. I mean, I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many
Oh
people are
my
on
god.
YouTube constantly, even
Yeah,
if it's their wash machine, so they don't have to pay for, somebody to come over and put the belt on it. Uh,
totally.
and I'm talking about my wife. The belt on the dryer went, and she just hears me. I'm like, "Oh, we should call somebody," and she's like, "I YouTubed it, already fixed it." I was like, "Huh?"
Yes, it's good to have someone like that in the household, right? Because 'Cause I'm like, I will choose what I learn about. I have no desire to learn about manual
Yeah,
labor to fix my wa I would have been you, I'd have been like, "Let's call someone, fix it."
yeah,
So,
yeah. because my for me, it's more important to work with other people and help them and helping
Mhm.
them become successful. So I don't have time to do that belt where it took
Yeah.
her just minutes. She
Yeah.
just YouTubed it. My son's the same way. Everything he does, if he gets stuck, he just YouTubes it. I mean, you can't YouTube a haircut.
No.
You'll that's a hands-on experience. You can't YouTube somebody serving you a nice dinner.
Or
You can
someone cutting
overeat it.
your yeah, or someone cutting your stomach open, a surgeon, you
Yeah,
gotta
YouTube a
yeah.
certain well, how many people Google diagnose themselves,
Oh, I do that all the time. It's really
Do you
bad. I was literally convinced I had lymphoma, like, 4 days ago. That's a problem.
Well, my brother went through med school, and he's in
Yeah.
our business now, right?
Oh,
But he
great.
said when he started learning of the different diseases, it
Mhm.
was funny how all the students, the med students, would think they had that
Mhm.
disease.
Yeah.
It's like talking about head lice. When you talk about head lice, people start itching scratching their head
Totally. Yeah.
because you just picture yourself, going through that. And I wish people would picture the same thing about when it comes to their future, their
Mhm.
success, their savings. We're not saying success is abundance of money that you're swimming in.
No.
Success to me means happiness. But
Mhm.
what is happiness to you? Is it a house? Is it the travel? But you got to understand how to create that success of happiness. And one of
Mhm.
them I always tell my students and the kids I come across to and people is like if you focus on taking care of your guest, give them
Mhm.
all the attention, give them what they need. If you help enough people get what they want, like Zig Ziglar said, they'll help you get what you want. Money will be the applaud for the great
Yeah.
job that you did.
I
And
I totally agree with that
yeah,
philosophy. I do not agree that it's do your passion and the money will follow. I think that's completely um false. I think you have to recognize, and this may be I'm sometimes I get a little too direct, but I
be
think
direct, be
you hit
direct.
the no, I think it's a huge problem. And I think people confuse hobbies with businesses.
Yep.
Okay. I think not everything has to be a business. It can be a fun hobby. Maybe you make a little bit of money, great, but recognize I've seen a lot of people do that. Recognize what's a hobby and what's a business. And also, it's not about doing what you're passionate about and the money will come. I fully agree with that philosophy of help other people be successful or get what they need, and then you will be compensated for that action. It's not about being super passionate. Um, it's not about being a super skilled artist. If another example, I mean, my mother-in-law, this is some I'm just referencing personal examples, but she is honest to God the most talented artist I've ever seen. Like, I would spend thousands, I don't have thousands of dollars to spend on art, but one day I would like to spend thousands of dollars in art in my future home. And honestly, she could charge thousands and thousands of dollars for a painting, but love her to death, she doesn't know how to sell, and she also doesn't want to. That's not what she values. She views it as a hobby. She doesn't want to make it a business. I'm sitting there, I'm like, you could have a gallery in New York, we could charge 5 grand a painting, and like, she doesn't want that, and that's fine. She wants to paint for fun. And
That's
she's in a
good.
stage. Yeah, but I think how many really I use that as an example, but let's take others who are like, do your passion and the money will come. That's not what she wants, right? But for people that actually need money to do that, and how many super talented artists do you see, but they never make money? It's the constant myth of the starving artist. And
Yes.
they don't understand the business element, they don't understand the finance element, and they suffer because there's other people that do. And there's artists that may not be as good as them, but they understand how to sell themselves, how to market themselves, how to have a business plan. And so ultimately they win. That's
Well,
me
Aaron,
being,
it's as
yeah,
simple as asking questions and
exactly.
not feeling stupid to do so. Get
Yeah.
away from that, self, like I'm gonna be really stupid if I ask Aaron this question. I'm gonna be really stupid if I ask Julio this question, or I'm gonna be really stupid if I ask this. No, you know what? Raise your hand. Go to people who are actually doing it
Hmm.
and say, "Forgive me for my ignorance, but I really admire what you do, and I want to do what you do. So I'm gonna ask you some questions." Because
Hmm.
I'll be honest with you, first starting it, well, I spoke 2 languages. I had no clue what words meant, what their meanings
Oh,
were, what
yeah.
bona fide meant, what, amortization meant, any of those terms.
Hmm.
Uh, but I wasn't afraid to ask, and if you were gonna laugh at me, shame on you. But
Oh,
as long as I
totally.
got my answer, I was great, but a lot
Yeah.
of people didn't laugh. You'd be surprised. There are some people will call you stupid and this and that, but there are people who are willing to help you
Mhm.
understand. And Aaron, you're one of those people. Um, I gotta ask you, do you take on like private clients if somebody wanted to take you on, or do you just take on small businesses or solopreneurs or
Yeah.
entrepreneurs? I mean,
So
what is it that you actually sort of
yeah.
that you could offer some of these
Yeah.
people listening today?
Yeah, I mean, I think number 1 is if you're curious to learn about money, and one of the things I didn't really talk about my own financial transformation, but I had a huge struggle. I mean, I kind of alluded to it a little bit
Tell
in
me,
my
tell me,
early
tell me, tell me,
20s.
tell me,
What was that?
tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me.
Oh. I mean, so in my early 20s, I was and we had just started building Qnity, and as money was unpredictable at that point. I didn't
Right?
know if I was going to get paid. If we didn't have sales, I didn't get paid, right? And so I was living in Chicago, and I don't know what about it, but I was very self-conscious about um I was very self-conscious because I think people thought I was super successful, my friends, but I was constantly stressed about money because it was so unpredictable, and it was like this roller coaster. And so I remember I think I was 25 or 26, I can't remember. So no, I think it was 25. So mid 20s, okay? So I was living in an apartment in Chicago. I'd just gone out drinking with my friends, doing my thing like a mid 20-year-old gal in Chicago does. And I was living in a big apartment complex. And my payment, I couldn't get I was at that point on a salary, but sometimes my salary would be paid 5 days late because we had to wait for a check to come in, right? So my rent was due, didn't have enough money in my bank account, so it bounced. And the policy of that apartment complex was to put an eviction warning on your door, like no questions asked, no warnings. So I get home from the bar. It wasn't even the bar, it was like a dinner. It was like 8:30 p.m. or something like that, and I see an eviction warning on my door. And obviously that was like a huge, so at that point I had already been stressed. And at that time I was like, I need to figure this out. Like I am done. Talk about money why and money plan. I do not want to be stressed about money. It is not how I want to live. I understand that that can't happen tomorrow. And I understand that that's a process. There's certainly been times since then I've been worried about money, but I ultimately but not stressed. You know what I mean? Like I was in a constant flight or fight and stressed mode about money. And so what I did was
You can
at
still
that
be stressed and fight, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And at that point, we have 3 arms of Qnity now, but at that time we just had our small business arm. So which was working with business owners and leaders to help them create more sustainable businesses. So at that time I was kind of like, I feel like I should not be struggling with this. At the time I also knew that we were building a business. So I could have easily been like, "Oh my god, I'm a fraud" at that time because I was stressed. But first of all, I wasn't actually delivering the service. I was working for the company, and we were in building mode. So all I did to change that, by the way, was learn about personal finance. Okay, that's all I did. I listened to every podcast I could find. I literally read every single book. I've read it, every single book. That's what I did. And at that time, the point for me to change my circumstances was I did have a bit of student loan debt. And so for me, which there's different philosophies on this, I just went hyper aggressive to pay it off. And I did. And every time I did it, it was helpful. And then I moved into building and investing mode. I chose to wait until I paid that off until I invested. Some people choose different ways, right?
Right.
Now, I think that just to me illustrates that I don't even remember what was the point of me telling you that?
Well, it was your struggle
Oh,
because a lot of people, yeah,
oh, I know.
you're
Yeah.
being real with us because a lot of
Yeah.
people think just because you have a business, even if you just started it, they think you're automatically a millionaire. You got tons of money.
Oh my God, I know.
I mean, people see the Paul Mitchell name on my buildings,
Hmm.
and they automatically think I am floating in it.
I know.
It's like, hello, did you not just see the pandemic that hit and
Right.
and we're
Right.
closed down and we remortgaged our home, everything just to stay
Hmm.
alive. And
Totally.
people don't understand, even if you're starting one, you're not I hate to use this word, but you're not a baller.
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
you're a
yeah.
struggler.
Yeah.
Uh,
That should be the new tagline. If you're an entrepreneur, you're not a baller, you're a
you're a
struggler.
struggler.
That's what it feels like in many cases. And there is not one. And I remember my dad used to always tell me this because I was like, why is this like I was too young to understand that this is kind of the natural course sometimes. And he's like, every entrepreneur has had these struggles. It's normal and normalizing it. And so I think part of what you can bring to the table is just normalizing that it's okay and everybody's been there. And so with regards to your question about, how do you interact with us? How do you interact with me? I'm not a consultant. I'm not a coach. I lead our company, right? That's my only job. So we have three arms. We have Qnity Inc., which is our small business arm. So if you have a small business, you can work with our amazing team members. And really the areas that we help small businesses on are mostly profit. So, what's left at the end of the day, right? Which ultimately the job of a business is to make a profit. And I think that is what a business is supposed to do.
I hope
And
so.
then number two is, and number two is driving revenue. So top line growth and managing the bottom line. That's really where we help. And then we also have learning systems and tools to structure execution. So we have a full suite of systems that are really designed for visual learners. So check out Qnity, and if you're a business owner, you can absolutely work with one of us there. Then we have Qnity for schools. So we're directly B2B. So the only way to get our financial literacy curriculum is for trade schools to bring it in for their students. We
Hint,
really,
hint.
yeah, hint, hint, Julio, hint, hint, Julio, to work with their students and to give businesses schools, which schools, as you know, trade schools are hit with their own challenges as business owners. And so this really is there to be a win for the business to provide a solution that sets their graduates up and also truly actually does make an impact on their students. Because had I gotten that information when I was a student before I graduated, my financial life would be very different. I really believe that. I believe yours maybe too. Many people's would.
Yes.
So it's giving those students a leg up. So that's on our Qnity for Schools arm. And then most recently, we have the Qnity Institute. And so that's what we were in DC on. So that's where we do research and data. Right now, we're doing earnings studies on the average earnings for service providers working in chain salon and spas and more locally owned and operated salons and spas. So those studies right now are quite specific to the beauty and wellness sector. And Tom really leads that division. I'm on all brands. Schools is kind of, to me, I think schools is where we can really change an industry if we bring that curriculum to students. I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, they get some
Um,
financial literacy now, but I think yours goes further into depth, depth.
I was like, I
I
don't
say
think.
my TH's
I
depth,
was like, I
not
hope that's
depth.
not what happened.
I
I
gotta say
hope
my
that's not what's
TH's
happening.
depth of how to really be
Totally.
successful.
Totally. And every student gets 2 years access. So, they learn about it in school and then they get to, once they're actually a professional, they get to learn about it. So that's really how you interact with us. I would say if you want more of this type of, one of my goals too was to provide a completely free resource because when I shared my own story, the biggest thing I learned was through learning through other people's transformations. So I was here and now I'm here. That was what gave me hope to believe I actually could change my reality and circumstances because it doesn't matter the magnitude of your situation. It's all relative, right? Like my situation wasn't crisis mode, but I was very stressed and really took it on. There's people who are actually in crisis mode, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of people. So if you go to Money 02, I have a podcast, which you are going to be on next week. I think it's next week, or maybe it's the week after.
Ooh.
And I'm super excited. And it's really all I do on that is share people's money stories and transformations. That's literally the whole point. I actually just had this week's episode was from a financial therapist, which believe it or not, there's an emerging field called financial therapy. It's about 12 years old. And
I
it
need that.
literally is people, I know. That's what I said. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could have gone. Because I actually went to therapy and a lot of the topics was like, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I be more successful? Why am I struggling with money? And it's like, it is a huge stressor for people. So that was a really interesting episode. I also have someone that was on that 14x her net worth in 10 years just by automating and doing things different. So and then there's people where it's like, hey, I've paid off $10,000 in credit card debt. So it's all very different magnitude of transformations.
So what is your podcast called?
It's called Money O2, and it's an O, not a zero.
Okay,
So it's
so
money
it's money
oxygen
O two.
too. Yep.
Okay,
And the on
letter O.
Instagram, yeah, on Instagram, it's money O2 pod.
And
And
you
that's
have some great people you interview and that tells
totally,
their stories of how they probably went from broke, uh,
totally.
to success or success
Yeah.
to broke, broke to
Yeah.
success. I mean, it can go back and forth like a
Oh,
ping
yeah.
pong ball, right? I always
Oh,
tell people ever
absolutely.
since I started my business, I sleep like a baby. Every 2 hours, I get up and cry.
Oh, I was like, "Really?"
No,
Oh my god,
somebody
I was
told me
like,
that years
"Wow."
ago. You know, like, I sleep like
Oh
a
my god.
baby. Every 2 hours, I get up and cry.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
So,
no, but, thank you so much for, our time is running out, and
yeah.
I thank you so much for, the great knowledge that you've given us, and people, I hope that, that some of you have heard that there are ways of learning how, even if you work a 9 to 5 job and, maybe you're making $15 an hour, you can still gather more wealth than somebody who's making $15,000 an hour. Am I right about that?
1000%. It is
So
what you do with it. It is
it's
what
what
you do
you
with
do
it.
with it. Yeah, and
Mhm.
and once again, that awakening was watching my own parents,
Mhm.
immigrants, doing it. They weren't
Yeah.
multimillionaires. We came here with nothing, but yet they took what little minimum wage they had, working in sweatshops, 2 to 3 jobs, but made it happen.
You know what's I would love I mean, I'm not an expert on this at all because I'm not an immigrant or my parents weren't immigrants. I'm sure some obviously my ancestors were at some point, but I am fascinated by the immigrant mentality. And I think that's like a whole because there's a lot of people that have there is a mentality of it's you work really hard, but you're also very responsible with the money. The immigrant in my experience, what I've seen for people that total anecdotally, but I've seen a lot of very successful families. I think arguably some of the most in my circle are first generation and their families have provided a new level of wealth. And it's that I don't know what it is. It's the maybe you can speak to it more, but
Yeah, I'm first generation immigrant here. So,
yeah.
and that's funny because I hear that a lot is people, well, I don't have opportunity. I don't have a chance. I don't have, maybe I'm a different skin color or I'm a different ethnic background, or maybe because I have a different sexual, belief
Mhm,
or whatever. Um, that has nothing to do with it. It's the will to want, the
mhm,
will to do, the will to work hard, the will to have commitment
mhm,
and passion and
mhm,
serve others.
mhm.
And you'd be surprised, because people think, well, you had it easy. No, I had to do
No.
whatever it took to deliver papers, shovel snow, cut grass, because I couldn't ask my parents for money. you
Mhm,
know um so there's an opportunity for everybody, and believe me, when you talk to immigrants, they'll tell you, and I'll tell you,
mhm,
you don't realize that when we came here, we at the time we came, we were discriminated against, especially them not even knowing if I was Italian, African,
mhm.
or Middle Eastern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I am all 3. But,
Mhm,
I was, born in Italy, but I come from those backgrounds, but I remember being kicked off people's porches just being Italian alone, "Get that guinea, get that wop off my porch,"
oh my
you know,
god. Yeah.
"Don't come near my kids," but that didn't stop me, and I hope it
Mhm,
doesn't stop a lot of people out there, and it didn't stop you as a young woman who had
mhm,
eviction notices on your door to
mhm,
say, "This is the end, I'll move back home."
mhm.
I'll just get security again, or maybe hook up with somebody who will take care of me and not even love them, because I
Yeah.
see that a lot of happen,
Oh,
and I've
yeah.
been with a lot of people through that too, and when they've become independent, oh my god, especially the women that work for me, I get so excited because especially, one person in particular, that's all she kept doing was, she had a little boy. She was on her own, and she would
Mhm.
give herself to anybody, just to try to move in or get a house, or so
Yeah.
I sat her down and helped her. I didn't care about me, but I helped her understand how she can become independent.
Mhm.
And my God, when I don't know what sprouted in her head. Maybe I said something, maybe somebody said something, but she got to the point where she so was independent, bought her own condo, had her
Oh,
own
that's the
place,
best.
and she
Yeah.
finally fell in love with the guy she loved, and she got married, and now she's living in the West somewhere. She was such an inspiration to see, and you're such an inspiration to hear. Um,
Oh, thank you.
and I look forward to being on your show where you can tell me to shut the hell up when I talk. Uh,
I can't wait to hear your story. I am so excited to have the mics flip so I can ask you all the questions I want. So
just
I'm
get a
really
bottle of aspirin next to you too.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, hey, Erin, thank you so much for being on today. And we want to thank you all for joining us today and getting some knowledge on wealth literacy and independence or knowledge. And we look forward to seeing you on our next show with our next guest. In the meantime, let's all thank Erin for being on our show and being a great sport and giving us great information. Have a nice day. God bless.
Thanks, Giulio.